Okay, great. People are coming in.
Give me a second. I'm just going to get my water.
I have too much caffeine in my hands. I was like, oh no. But I also have water.
Oh, nice. Is it coffee you're drinking?
Mm-hmm. I slept in today. It was great.
Oh God, I woke up at 10 o'clock and I feel miserable. I never wake up past 10, like past 9, and it
Hey,
sucks.
Magnus. Can't hear you yet.
Oh, snap. He has like a really cool like setup.
Yeah. I'm broke, so
Okay, does it work now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Happy Saturday.
Happy
Happy
Saturday.
Saturday.
Oh God.
All right. Okay, I think pretty much everyone who needs to be here is here. So I'm gonna go ahead and start. We are recording, just so everybody knows, and I'll post it after the event. Right now, there's not that many people in the audience, but people will come in as as the event goes on. So no need to worry about that. And Drew, can you go ahead and test your camera just to make sure that we can see you?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I can hear you, but not see you.
I haven't used this. Okay, so maybe
Yep.
there's like some version
There
of
he
me
is.
showing.
Yep. Yep.
Fractional Drew.
Yep.
Oh, nice.
1 minute.
Awesome. Okay, great. All right, so kind of the point of this event is just to give us a space to casually talk a little bit about our stories and the kinds of things that we deal with. I sent you all an email. You might not have read it, and it's fine if you haven't. It just had the questions and like some of the stuff that's going to happen here. So it's just like there's not a real place for us to say our narrative. So I created a space for that. So everybody here is neurodivergent in some way, and all of the panelists are autistic, and it's a wholly led autistic thing. So we need more of this. So I'm basically we're just going to start out, and Danielle's got a list of questions for the younger panelists, and then we'll probably do that up until about 2 p.m. and after we hit 2 p.m. we'll shift over to Magnus and Angela and Daniel and Bill. So it should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to this. All right,
Sounds
so
great.
I'm gonna go off video, and we can let Danielle and the first set of panelists take it away. Just introduce yourselves, say whatever you want to say about yourself, so that people can kind of relate to you a little bit, and so they can get that we're not just robots. All right.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. Hello, I'm Danielle Pavliv. I'm excited to be here today for the Autistic Gold panel. I'm really, really excited for this event and to see all of your amazing faces. I'm like, my face is going to hurt by the end of today from smiling so much. getting to have this chat with you. So thank you, Chris, for providing this space. Again, I'm Danielle Pavliv. My pronouns are she and her. And I wanted to first start off by telling you a little bit about me and kind of my perspective here. So I identify as someone who is on the neurodivergent spectrum, I'll say. While I'm not autistic, I have anxiety and depression and OCD. So I kind of represent that perspective. And throughout the last few years and getting to work with these amazing individuals, I've learned so much about their experiences. And so I'm excited to dive a little bit deeper into that today. So I'd love for you all to introduce yourselves before we kind of go into the first question. So I'm going to kind of go across my screen. So Ash, I'm going to pass it over to you to start.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Ash, full name Ashley. Just please call me Ash. I'm 20 years old. I'm a senior at UNC Chapel Hill. As you guys can probably tell, I'm autistic. And I guess a fun fact about me is that I really like dogs.
You said you like to hug?
I like dogs.
Oh, dogs. Oh, yes. I thought you said hugs. I was like, we can't hug these days.
Oh, no.
No hugs.
No hugs.
Yes, I love dogs too. And Ash, remind us what your dog's name is again.
Oh, his name is Soldier Boy.
Soldier
as
Boy.
in Crank That Soldier Boy.
I love it. I love it. Your dog
funny.
is very cute. Thanks, Ash. Okay, Pavani.
Yeah, I'm Pavani, and I am a junior, and I go to school in the middle of nowhere, Indiana. And basically, I think a fun fact, maybe going back to animals, is that I have been eyeing at fostering neonatal kittens for a year, and I am like so wanting to do it. And I'm allergic to cats, but I'm like, I really want to like sit and help those like teeny tiny 1-day-old baby kittens, because they're the most euthanized group in animal shelters. So I am like, I can get animals for free, but also help them. So hopefully I can convince my parents to keep kittens in my apartment.
I love it. I love it. As an animal lover myself, and with dogs and cats, I appreciate that. Pavani, we'll have to keep us posted on that. All right,
Yeah,
Ryan.
I will, hopefully.
All right, Ryan, you're up.
Hi, I'm Ryan Patelkew. I go to NC State University. I'm a senior right now, studying computer science with graphic communication and environmental science minor. So I'm autistic and also have OCD and anxiety. And then I don't really have like a kind of animal related fun fact, though I suppose you can relate that to my environmental science minor, that I do care about the environment.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. Great to see you. All right, Drew, your turn.
Hey, I'm Drew Wock. I have recently graduated from NC State University as of December and am now working at SAS as a full-time software developer. So let's go. And I think my fun fact, I'm just going to explain my environment here. What I've been doing a lot since the pandemic hit and I had any sense of free time, which has been since I've graduated only. I started doing a lot of woodworking. I think that's been my special interest for a while since mine tend to be temporary. And I am autistic and also I have ADHD.
Awesome. Thanks, Drew. All right. So I thought, a good place to start would be for you all to share a little bit about how you discovered that you are autistic. Can you talk a little bit about that, about your experiences, and I'll let you all kind of choose to chime in if you'd like. So just kind of pass the ball.
I'll start. Mine is actually like really complicated, but also a little bit dark, like in a sense of, so basically all my life I knew like there was something off. My mom always knew there was something off about me because I struggled to make friends. I had like quote unquote weird interests, like obsessions. Like I think one of them was 2-car garage. I was on a 6, and then like I was into random trivia. So I had all these like quote unquote obscure like interests, and my mom knew always there was something different, and even I knew. It's just like I didn't know how to deal with it. So I was pretty much like a very like withdrawn kid, and was like on my own, I guess. Like for me, like not having friends was a very normal thing, and it's kind of is now, but it's much better. And then basically, I think for me, when I was 18, unfortunately, I developed an eating disorder. I'm fine now, but and that basically led to like a whole lot of scary crap they were telling me. Like I was hospitalized for a week. I almost died, but that's a long story. But they basically were like, oh my God, you have the like, so the thing is like, correct me if I'm wrong, like they say that people with eating disorders have a mindset of a addict, like a drug addict, which makes sense because it consumes your life. But my mom was like, there is something off about like the way I developed my eating disorder, and also the whole like spectrum of people being diagnosed. Like I hope and not anyone is being triggered here, but basically what happened then that prompted my mom was like she needed to get it. Well, she was like, we need to get an NPT test. Like they were just telling like things that were true but didn't apply to me, and that was when I was like, I fit the glove for like Asperger's, like, or like, you know, autism or whatever. And I think it completely clicked because when I was a kid, I read a lot of books, and for me, a lot of characters I related to were autistic, like at least if they were written really well. And I was like, oh my God, this really just, it changed my life in the sense of I understood what I thought was wrong was just, it's going to be a problem, but there are so many more resources and ways for me to kind of cope. Now I'm fine. Like now I live alone. I'm like, even food, like I'm doing great now.
Oh, my story is oddly pretty similar. I guess it's just dealing with being a girl. So with me, it was more so that I didn't meet my dad until I was 8 years old. Long story. But when I did meet my dad, I was very withdrawn, very quiet. My interests were mostly fairies and books and video games. And eventually he learned that I acted just like how my dad acted, and my dad acted just like how my grandpa acted. To the point that there's a photo in my grandma's house of me, my dad, and my grandpa at 6 years old. And we all made the same face on that in the photo. We were uncomfortable. We were like, so it was more so that like, even though I was different on my dad's side, they were like, oh, you just act like how your father acts, you act like how your grandpa acts, it's fine. And fast forward like 10 years, I'm in high school. I have a bunch of random knowledge in my head. Like I memorized the whole New York City subway system because the map is like 5 feet tall and you get it for free. So I had it up in my room and memorized it because stereotypically I really like trains, which is a oof. And basically what happened was I was in high school. I did like an early college program where you did like high school and like 2 years like your associate's degree at the same time. And I was struggling because like I made it the senior year of high school. My one friend moved away. So I was like all alone and I didn't understand like what was going on. I was just like, I was so focused on that one person, like the one friend. I was like, okay, cool. I have one friend. I'm good to go. I was like, oh, I have no friends now and I don't understand what's going on. And I basically had a mental breakdown senior year of high school after submitting my college applications. And my guidance counselor was like, oh, it's okay, honey, you're on the spectrum. Like, yeah. So crazy story. Apparently my whole school assumed I was on the spectrum and it was on my file because of how I behaved. And her face when she saw it wasn't on my file, I'll remember forever because I don't remember faces that much. But she was like in such shock that like she called my mom. She called my mom and she was like, you really need to take Ashley in for an evaluation because like I definitely like Asperger's pretty much like fit me and my dad and my grandpa to a T. So it was more so like even though I was like weird and like slightly unusual growing up, for me it was like normalized because that's how my dad's side was. Like everyone on my dad's side, we were all like weird with touching, weird with hugs. We would show affection in odd ways. My dad liked to pat heads, show affection. Hence why whenever I like really like someone younger than me, like a little cousin, I like head pat them to like show love. Because to me, it's just like the touching is like hard. So it's like nice to have like other ways to do it. Or like I would have like little tricks and little tics that my dad would teach me. He'd be like, when you're talking to a person and you don't want to look them in the eye because it's uncomfortable, I don't get why other people do that. Look at their nose. Don't look at their nose hair. Look at their nose. So it was just like normalized, I guess, for me. So when I did figure out there was like a name for it, I felt like a big surge of relief mostly because I was like, okay, cool, I'm not crazy, because people used to joke that my dad and my grandpa were like a little crazy, but now we just all know we were autistic, and it doesn't make it anything worse. It's just different. Oh, I'm done, by the way.
Go ahead, Ryan. It looks like you're about to talk.
I was gonna say one thing Drew was about to. I was going to ask if he wanted to. I can go now though. I didn't really, for me, it wasn't like something that I really remember how I like found out, because I was very young. I was in elementary school, like kindergarten, I think, when I was diagnosed at the time with Asperger's. And I know that the naming has changed a bit, but I know there definitely were signs, whether it was kind of things like not really wanting to, or not really showing any interest in interacting with other people, or in kind of the people that I did want to interact with, they weren't like my peers. They were like, when I was really little, it would be like the teachers or something like that, like just different, yeah, different kind of roles. And it's also true, like I really have and like had like very few like friends, and kind of the way I would interact with other people, things I would say. I know, like Ash, I know you mentioned about memorizing like a I think like a subway map. Like when I was in second grade, I think it was second grade, my teacher ended up telling my mom about this, because she was like reading a book to the class, and it's one that I had read all of the ones in like that series, and they all started the same way. So the entire first chapter, word for word, like mouthed along with as she was reading it. I have that same tendency to like kind of memorize, and like I'm very hyper focused on certain details where other things really are not as much. I don't know.
So in my experience, I think my experience is very similar to Ryan's, obviously with its little differences. It's kind of interesting, I think, especially 2000s era diagnoses of Asperger's, and I feel like there was this obvious gender divide, and I don't know if that's closed recently or not, because I don't think there's enough data on that yet. But anyways, yeah, it was elementary school, you know. I never really was told the story of the buildup, but eventually one day I got pulled aside to do testing at school. I don't know if it was something my mom agreed to covertly or what, but I didn't even know it was testing for anything. I just kind of went in and solved some math problems and did like IQ testing. I know that was one of the things that they did as part of it. And eventually I got diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome as well. And I didn't really find out or understand what that meant like until way, way on. And so, yeah, it was a while before it really became clear what it actually meant to me. I think it was more so middle school, high school. For the most part, I tried to kind of believe I was just like neurotypical for a while, because I just didn't really understand what I would do about that anyways. And so basically, what I think is interesting, I'm just gonna jump forward a lot because I don't really know what kinds of stories to tell from high school or whatever. It was kind of more so the general effect of the general flow of how my social life went, rather than any particular stories. But anyways, in college, I noticed that about 1.5 years after I met people would be like, "Are you autistic?" This would always be people who are basically best friend level at that point. But it's like, well, yeah, you figured it out. Anyways, I also got diagnosed with ADHD very recently. I had personally suspected that for a long time, but I didn't have the like academic disruptions that you normally see with it until pretty much when COVID struck. Because I don't know why, but at home it was a lot harder to stay on task. And so, yeah, I also had a psychiatrist from depression from earlier last year as well. So it was kind of a natural segue into figuring out that diagnosis. But yeah, here I am now.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much for sharing. I know these stories are very personal, and so we certainly appreciate you, sharing your experiences and being vulnerable. It's hard. One thing, Drew, you just said, and many of you touched on, was other individuals assuming, right, making these assumptions about you before you even knew. So how did that make you feel? Like, did it make you feel, did you question? Were you offended? Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Oh,
I was gonna
Okay.
say you turned right into that since I just came from there. In my case, I don't think it was very offensive, especially because the friend I was really talking to that made that guess the first time, it was someone that I believe could probably get a diagnosis herself and just really hasn't done it yet. So I think it was kind of almost a self-referential question. Plus, like if they almost suspect for themselves, what offense am I gonna take if they try to guess that for me?
I got you. So you already had a trusting relationship with this person.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Drew. Go ahead, Ash.
yeah. So with me, it was like my high school guidance counselor, who honestly, straight up, like she's a queen. I love her. I still like go back to my high school sometimes and be like, hey, everyone apply to my school. It may seem scary, but everyone can do it if you try hard enough. Like I did a presentation late last year, like before COVID and everything else like that. So with me, it was more so like adults would be like, okay, she's a little off, because like when I'm like stressed, I go full monotone or like mess up like my speech. Like I'll do repetitive, like if you know like how you can stutter, it's like that, except I repeat certain sounds when I have like an overload. And some people have seen it and they're like, oh, okay, they're like, oh, you're autistic. Because I was like, people just could see the obvious. Meanwhile, like on my dad's side, they're like, oh, you act like your dad. So for me, it was like the assumption wasn't insulting, because I was like, there's a name, there's a purpose. Oh my God. Like, it was like that basically. And then like I do have like a lot of Aspie friends, because especially in my major, like it's a stereotype that like computer science majors tend to have Asperger's. But sadly, in my department, I think it's true. There's like a professor that's like super sweet that everyone and their mom swears he's autistic, and I think he is. He's open about it in his office, but like in general, like his mannerisms, everyone's just like, oh, you're an Aspie professor, and he ends up like adopting all the Aspie students, which is something really cute. So he'll make sure we get like into classes, he'll make lists for us and try to help us out. He'll be like, it's okay, I know making friends is hard, but if you focus hard enough on your work, you can achieve like anything. So there were like group chats of like autistic students and stuff like that. So like I'm in like a group chat with like Aspie students in my major. And even though we get off topic a lot, it's nice having like those assumptions, because like we didn't tell the professor we were outright like autistic. He just saw like the behaviors, our mannerisms, and he decided he wanted to help us because he himself remembered how it felt. So it is like beneficial mostly, because most of the time when people assume that, they don't assume less. They normally just assume, okay, like thankfully like the literature has changed, so they're like more open and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a really great point, great perspective. I don't know if Pavani, you want to add,
Yeah,
or
I want to
Ryan?
chime in. Yeah, like, wait, the question again was like how, okay, it was about the friends thingy, right?
Well, it was
So
about, the assumption, right, that because maybe you acted different, right,
yeah,
that assumption.
so actually the interesting thing is that I actually lived in India for 3 years from like ages 7 to 10, which is really interesting. So during second, third, and fourth grade, I think that's typically sometimes when people like the traits that you maybe were concealing for like a while kind of come out. And actually that was when I think I started displaying more and more of like those typical autistic behaviors. But because I lived in India and, like it's 2007, like the India wasn't as educated on like, mental disorders and stuff. Like it was actually a stigma, and there's still a huge stigma. So from like maybe from my community specifically or my experience, but my teachers are like, there's something off about her. And I think everyone said there was something off and off, like, and I think when only in my senior year of high school, like bless my counselors, like they're so nice. I'm still in touch with them. But when they said, I told them I was autistic, they were like, oh my God, the answer was staring right in front of us. Like, why didn't we even mention that? Because they're like, it makes so much sense. Like, why you have such a good relationship with your teachers. Like, I prefer the company of older people. Like, literally my friends were teachers, which is, I used to eat lunch with them all the time, which is really looks weird in the front of like eyes of like my peers, but not weird to me. So I think that was when like a lot of adults were like, oh my God, it makes sense. And now it's like, I don't really have any professors who are autistic. Like I do know one professor who is like, and actually people hate him because they don't understand how to deal with him. But I'm like, I asked him in his office, like, are you autistic? And he's like, yes, how do you know? I'm like, I can tell because I'm autistic. And he said, oh my God. He said, like, that is so sharp. And he's like the only, I think I'm like one of his very few favorite students because everyone whines and moans like about how difficult he is to deal with. But that's just my experience. But as such in my school, like I've never really disclosed it. And I don't know, like to be frank, I'm gonna be really honest, like my school, unfortunately a lot of people are that stereotypical Midwestern racist kind white male. So that's not really fun to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Like the Karens and stuff you hear, that's in my school.
Thanks, Pavani. I don't know if Ryan or Drew, if there's anything you want to add.
Oh no,
not really much that I would add, kind of back with like the original like other people kind of noticing things. I mean, I suppose people like noticed like I would do things, but then I didn't really notice if they were making an assumption. Like that's the thing. Like my focus wasn't even really on that. It was on like whatever I was doing or whatever I wanted to be doing. So yes, there were probably people that were like either judging in some way or were but then also others were like, wow, he's like really smart with this thing. Like and yes, that is occurring, but it wasn't even something I think I really was noticing like as it happened. I mean, when I was really little, I probably never really thought about it. It's interesting, by the way, that everyone mentioned and with like their teachers and rather when they were in like K through 12 school, rather talking to their teachers or maybe even in college to their professors than other peers. I feel like I would also agree with that kind of up until like really more recently, like within the last year or two, where I think I've started to also like communicate with my peers more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you all for sharing. That's it sounds kind of like having it kind of out there in the open, or having conversations around your identity actually made you feel more comforted in knowing that you're not alone, right? And that there's an explanation, right, for what is seemingly weird to the greater public. It is not, right? It's very normal, and that that you're not alone, right? And I think that that's really important. I saw in the chat there's a couple comments about autistic radar, that AUTDAR, I hope I'm saying that right, that's a thing, right? You know, finding, you know, groups and, you know, socializing, like Ash, you mentioned your group at UNC, and, you know, kind of, we're all human, right? And we all like to connect with folks that are like us. And so it's comforting to know that there's that community. I know we have a couple comments in the chat. I want to make sure we get to the questions that have been posed. One of the questions was around sensory issues. So would anyone like to talk a little bit about that, and any recommendations?
Yeah.
Oh, I like touching other people, like hugs and stuff. You heard me earlier say no hugs, like no hugs. Like even with family members, I very rarely give hugs. So like it's like a special thing whenever I like hug a family member. I mean, if once they're over the age of 3, the amount of hugs you get from me per year go down to like under 5, unless you're my mom, which at that point it's normally like 15. But like for me, sensory things like loud sounds, loud noises, I wear noise canceling headphones all the time. Like back when my lectures were in person, the comp sci department at my school is overcrowded. So we tend to be in giant lecture halls, and they have fluorescent lights. And one thing people don't know is that if you're autistic, you can sometimes hear fluorescent lights. And it would drain like my sensory energy. Like I would be like a zombie by the time the class is over, because like you hear all these people writing and typing and clicking and clacking, and then the fluorescent lights going and the pain. And then by the time it's done, I'm like, oh, don't know where I am. Like I would get confused and dazed and like not know where I'm going. So like my school pretty much made like an accommodation for me, stating that I'm allowed to wear noise canceling headphones and like AirPods like at all times, because they realized it's dangerous for me because I tend to go to an overload very easily because of like all that stimuli. So it's more so like controlling the stimuli and controlling your environment. Like I hate sticky hand sanitizer. It drives me crazy. I wear sweaters all the time because it's like a heavy object and then it's warm. Or like my backpack is always super heavy because like it's just the pressure. So it's more so like for me, it was like pretty much making myself more like pretty much like the world can't be more accommodating, but I can be more accommodating personally. So it's more so making myself in such a way that I can handle the world easier. Oh, everyone's like putting in the chat. I'm like, yes, I also hate handshakes because other people's hands freak me. Like, I'm like, other people's hands freak me
You're
out too.
exactly
Like, it's nice to see so many people relate. I'm like, oh, I'm so happy you don't know. But yeah, it's like pretty much it's not so much like the world can't accommodate, but you can accommodate. So it's more so like adjusting myself for the world. Because I used to joke up to my mom that like whoever's in charge put my life on hard mode, because if my life was on easy mode, I would be president already. So that's like a joke I like say. So I was like, oh, it's okay. It's a little bit hard sometimes, but it has to be hard or else I'll be bored. So yeah.
Can I add? Yeah, so basically, like for me, I think I was lucky in the sense of like, cause like even when I used to say, I think I used to have sensory issues as a kid. Like my parents were like, "Oh my God, you have loud music." I used to cover my ears. I think I've desensitized to myself. So the way I do it is like, I think I also need complete quietness. Is that one thing I have learned is like there are things like that are like, as much as I can control everything, there are things going to be outside of my comfort zone. Like loud music is a big fat thing I hate. I cannot stand loud music, you know? So the way I actually have done it is, at least for me, is I started desensitizing myself to it. So for me, listening to loud music for 1 minute is better than, you know, like, cause like people can play loud music anytime. So when I start taking things that are outside my control and like start getting myself used to it, it helps. Like now I have progressed to like people in my school play thrash metal or death metal. I couldn't handle it, but now I can handle death metal for like 20 or 30 minutes, which was a huge, big fat thing a year ago. And then another thing is like even handshakes is like I initiate the contact. So I don't like being hugged. I hate I only hug my mom, you know, that's a different story. Like, the thing is, I take the control and put my hand out, and that is, I think, a big fat social cue that you don't want to be touched. And I think also maybe the world has to adjust, is that consent is a big thing about touch. Is like, not everyone wants to be hugged. So I think actually we should all ask permission. But I think the biggest thing is you have to take control. I think if you take control of situations that you know like are gonna result in things you don't like, you have the control. And then also desensitizing, like you have to slowly get it, because like there are always going to be things out of control. So that's how I dealt with sensory stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Pavani.
Yeah, I kind of would just add, like, with regards to like the buzzing of like the fluorescent lights, or sometimes like the old TVs that they sometimes had like mounted. Okay, I see you you know what I'm talking about, Ash. But the ones that they had mounted on like the walls, they have like this buzzing, or like it's a whine or something like that, that drove me crazy. And a lot of times I did have to learn to, you know, sometimes deal with it. At other times, if it's like the fluorescent lights, like sometimes they're fine, like if they're like newer, and then they kind of start making that sound as they get older or something. So that's something where like I would be more likely to kind of put in a request or contact someone to like try to get those resolved, or suggest like an alternative. Of course, certain things like textures and feels, like when I was younger, that was something. So I would like have, you know, like a different material, something I was more comfortable with. And that's kind of really what I used.
So,
Anyone else?
so I think that I think the more common sensory issues don't actually affect me as much. For me, what really gets to me is chemical smells. Chemical smells will often cause a sensory overload, like instantly for me, depending on what they are. Especially like bleach or paint will kind of make me start to feel like I'm itching all over. That could be an allergic reaction, I don't know, but I think it's psychological more so than anything. I actually have a respirator mask now. I don't wear that or anything because that's just like weird to wear in public. It's only because I use painting and stuff. I actually use paints and bleach cleaning for my apartment now. And wearing a respirator mask that makes it completely smell like nothing in fresh air during cleaning and painting makes it amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because with COVID, right? Like now with a mask on, I guess that's become more you know, normal, right? Wearing a mask. So one of the questions in the
Like
chat
this,
oh, give
it's
us
not for you guys.
a glimpse.
Like this,
Okay.
Have that.
I highly recommend it if any of you guys clean with like strong smelling products, especially ones that are actually harmful.
For me, that's due to my anxiety with everything with COVID. Like when I had to go in like a place, I had got one of those.
Oh, they're not very good against COVID, if I'm going to be honest, though.
P100.
The P1, I don't think they work well for viruses. I think they're specifically for molecular sized protection. They also have an exhale valve, which means whatever you are projecting is getting out to everyone, just as if you weren't wearing anything.
So yeah, that's interesting because I mean, right now we're wearing masks, right? We should be wearing masks, I should say, and our social distancing, not being encouraged not to touch each other. So hopefully, when we're able to be more social again, that people will still kind of continue with kind of that respect of, you know, our personal space. Since we've, you know, been social distancing for so long, hopefully people will be more cognizant of germs and touching each other, to where kind of like Pavani, you said that you are, you know, you prefer to be the one to kind of initiate, you know, initiate the handshake. That, you know, hopefully there'll be more awareness around that than there has been in the past. So, and also one of the questions in the chat was around COVID specifically. So how are you handling the current mask mandates, and have you found anything that's made it easier?
Oh, okay. I'll start. I guess we're just going in this order now. We made an order. I guess, because like,
I think we should
yeah.
stick to it. It's actually kind of predictable and good.
Yeah, it's a lot easier because then I'll be like, okay, so I go first, and then Pavani, and then Light Group, and then Ryan, and it's like weird circle, but we made a pattern out of talking.
I like it. We'll keep up with it.
But yeah, when it comes to COVID and the masks, I discovered like I only have like one brand of masks I wear most of the time. Like I do wear the medical ones occasionally when I have to like wash my other fabric ones, but all of my fabric ones are like the same style or the same type. Like you know the cloth Hanes masks? Where it's like it's like Hanes, like the company makes underwear made masks, and it's like underwear for your face. And it's perfect. It is like perfect. It doesn't hurt my ears. It doesn't have hard pressure. It fits nicely. It's stretchy. It doesn't like do like when you breathe out and I don't know. It's just perfect. Like for me, I have like one specific type of mask. Masks in a bunch of different colors because like I only wear like one specific type of cloth mask because for me it was like a sensory thing because if you get the ones with like the little straps that are like elastic, my ears like mutiny and stuff like that. So for me with the mask mandate, it's been like sensory wise, I discovered what worked really fast because my mom was like, hey, this is the brand that makes the underwear and the socks that you wear. Here you go, because I also only wear one type of sock as well. But it's also been harder for me to communicate in public because when I do go out in public, when there's a lot of like stimuli in the foreground and in the background, it's hard for me to understand what somebody is saying. So I normally look at people's lips to understand like what they're saying, kind of. It's not like lip reading, but it's more so like the attention mixed with like what I'm hearing helps me process. Like I have problems with auditory processing. So because of everyone wearing masks, it's been harder for me to understand what people are saying. So I have to like ask people, be like, hey, do you mind like repeating yourself again? Or can you say that again? I didn't hear you. And they're like 6 feet away from me, expecting me to be able to hear them. But because of all the stimuli going on, it's hard for me to make out the like sound waves, I guess. So it's like I have to look at their mouth to like fully understand. So it's been like harder for me to communicate actually because of all the masks. Because yeah, I'm bad at auditory processing.
Yeah, thanks. Pavani?
Yeah, in terms of COVID, I'll say like I would actually have to say I'm negatively affected. Like I don't know, COVID has been like one of those like it's been driving me nuts. Like I'm such an outdoors person and it's like it sucks. Like I love being outside and for the first time because of like my fear of getting COVID, which I think is now like I think people used to like exaggerate. Oh my God, you will always avoid crowds. Now like we're like, yeah, you have to avoid crowds if you don't want to get COVID. It's like now it's like outdoors. Everyone is outdoors now, so it's like it's even more harder for me to find ways. And for the first time, I hate being in the north in such a cold place because I can't get out of the house. So I think COVID has made me realize how much I hate being online all the time. Like I can deal with it. I mean, I love working from home, but not this way. So my hope is like I can keep the work from home stuff, but I can go to stores and stuff like that. And also like nobody wears masks here. It's Karen land. So it's kind of like a doozy because it's like I'm such an introverted person, but like any person, you need social contact. You need to get out of the house. Otherwise, you're going to be like holed up and depressed. And it's kind of for me finding a fine balance. And luckily, next week, I'm actually just ripped the cord and said, I'm flying home. I'm sick and tired of driving 11, 12 hours each time going back and forth to Indiana. Like I live like on the border of Illinois. So I am like, I'm done with this stuff. I think I've hit the point of like, screw it. COVID is going to keep on being here. Like I don't know when I'm going to get a vaccine and I'm just flying. It sucks, but my mental health is more important.
Yeah, great point.
On the note of, just sorry to like cut in, I was going to say, I know we had actually been talking about like with where we'll get the vaccine. Like that's one thing that I know I've been anxiously awaiting being able to get as soon as possible. Kind of for for me, it's just been anxiety. That's the biggest thing. Less, I personally haven't really gone anywhere at all. So like I don't go places. So like I've probably in total been out of that house like into places where I'd be like wearing masks like 20 hours or less since COVID started. So so like I'll walk outside, but then really like I use like an Under Armour mask. It's a certain one, again, different, like a different feel. I'll use an electromeric respirator on occasion, but that's just a different feel the way it is. That's kind of how it is for me, but the bigger impact has been my anxieties, because that's kind of also connected with my OCD in addition, and so that's kind of amplified everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I put in the chat that, yeah, my OCD has skyrocketed with COVID already. I have sanitizer all over my desk right now, and I'm at home. Certainly it's yeah, I can relate. I have a very similar one. I'm not sure, Drew, you had some comments in the chat too around COVID, if you want to chime in.
Oh, absolutely. I think for me, COVID has had like a neutral-ish effect on my social life. Some good, some bad, but I think I really am ready for it to be over. So as I explained in the chat, one thing I've experienced is that it's much harder for me to maintain friendships because I don't like having to text people. I think this is honestly an ADHD thing especially though, because ADHD people stereotypically have a hard time responding over text and keeping up with people over text. I'm more of an in-person friend. I like to have consistent meetings with people. And so for the most part, I've been reclusive with all but except a certain couple characters. I think I also have always hated crowds, and COVID has made me hate crowds even more. So a lot of times I see crowds, and I hate wearing a mask when I'm outside on the trail or something. So every time I see people, it's like, oh, again. It's yeah, hard to meet up with people. But overall, I think it's also going to have a pretty positive effect. For one, people are going to have the power to stay away from people and avoid them for a long time after COVID is over, just because they want to. And I think a lot of people have also had the opportunity to look themselves in the mirror and probably make some positive changes that will last as well. The only thing is, I don't think it's net positive for everyone if we think about it, because I'm sure a lot of people have just gone down the drain at the same time. It's really just how individuals have been affected by COVID. And yeah, I don't know. I think I'm lucky. I picked up a hobby that I've been chilling this whole meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, and Drew, that's such a great point. And one of the questions I wanted to ask is, from my own experiences, I always considered myself more of an extroverted introvert. And with COVID, spending so much time, by myself and, just my partner and I found that I have become more introverted and more okay with just being with myself. And I've even picked up some new hobbies as well. So Drew, you mentioned woodworking. I'm not sure if the rest of you all want to share, like, how have you maintained your mental health during this time, and have you picked up on any new hobbies or skills to kind of help during this time?
Okay, so I guess we're just going in like the order.
Yep, you go first.
I love that we
Ash.
love patterns so much we made one. But basically, like, I started like knitting like crazy, and I'm trying to keep plants alive. I'm really bad at keeping them alive apparently, but I've been knitting and doing plants, and I've been walking like a lot everywhere. But my mental health, I was very negatively affected by COVID because my mom's a nurse. You could probably tell where this is going. Yeah, she's a nurse that specializes in Alzheimer's and dementia care, and she actually caught COVID. And I went from going out occasionally, like once or twice a week, to being fully agoraphobic, absolutely terrified of going outside. I actually spent 2 months straight only being at home because it was just so scary. Because, like, for me, it was like my mom caught it, and luckily she had a very mild case. And I was just so scared because she had like a severe side effect afterwards. So, okay, I feel bad now. But I was just like terrified, absolutely yeah, agoraphobic. Like I wouldn't go out. It took like my friends. Luckily, I live off campus. So I had friends who lived in the area, and they coaxed me outside with the promise of food and Mario Kart as like a mental health check. So I guess that like worked out really well. Was that like at least I had like someone in the area who realized that I was just mentally just like terrified, like absolutely like abhorred by like the outdoors. Like I would go outside, walk my dog, go inside, that's it. Like I only went to the store once a week. Like it was just terrifying, but luckily like knitting has helped me a lot because it's a little repetitive motion you do over and over again until you make a new object. My brain loves that. And I've been drawing and reading and while watching too many videos. So it was like really, and cleaning. Yeah, cleaning's also one of them. But it's been like really nice having like all this extra time to myself because before COVID, so much of my time was spent like going back and forth to do activities on campus and do clubs, and like I kept myself busy because the busier I am, the happier my mind is. So for me, it was just pretty odd, just like having like nothing to do, but I started getting busy at home and it's been helping a lot too. So yeah, and COVID is, I hate COVID, it's so scary. But other than that, like mental health wise, I am getting better and learning how to manage myself better, especially being alone.
Yeah, thanks, Ash. And I hope your mom's okay. Good, good, very good. All right, Pavani.
Yep. So for me, pretty much I've been reading a lot more, which is like really nice. Like I read a lot. I probably was reading like one book a week. Now I upped it to 2 to 3, which is a lot. I've just been reading a lot, which has also been, I've also been playing piano like here and there. I've also been kind of crocheting, but I think one thing I have been doing is getting out and being outdoors a lot more. That has really been really helpful for me, like running and all that stuff. So I think for me, anything, I've just been doing a lot more activities, and I've also like found out like I've also been kind of like more in the book world. Like when I say I'm really involved in the book world, I really am involved. So I've been kind of like interacting with a lot more reader communities, and I've just been doing a lot more of that since the pandemic, but I think it's something I really want to continue. It's like a really good hobby and thing for fun, and I'm also broke, so like feeding my book habit of like getting Kindle ebooks of like, I don't know, it'd be total of like $40 a month, which is a hefty fee. I do a lot of like free books in exchange for honest reviews. So I do a lot of that stuff, which has been really cool. And I have actually met quite a few people virtually, which is kind of nice. So I probably maybe formed like more online virtual friendships, but otherwise nothing has changed because most of my friends are like have always never lived in the same country or state as me, so it's always been virtual. So nothing has changed in that front.
All right, Ryan.
Okay, so it's kind of just like what's changed like since, like, can you repeat the question again, please?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So with COVID, how have you maintained your mental health? I know you talked a little bit about that before with the sanitizer and everything. And then have you picked up on any new hobbies, or how have you stayed busy?
Well, I feel like I definitely have not done as well as I would want with mental health. Like I've had more, like definitely an increase in anxiety, like an anxiety or panic attack. I've had a few of those, which is something I'd never had before. So that's something that's been a lot harder. I try to keep myself busy doing something, whether it is like I have a journal, and it's funny, I actually started it in January of 2020, and I did not anticipate what it would become, but so I write in that like every night before I go to bed. I've kind of become even more addicted to technology than I was before, but that's not a good thing. That's not a good strategy. That's just something that I've noticed that's happened. And as long as I'm kind of like, I've been going outside, walking a lot, trying to get exercise that way. I got like a pull-up bar. I'm trying to do some different sort of things to at least get out some energy, like if I feel stressed or overwhelmed or something. I don't really have the best strategies because I'm still kind of trying to figure out the best strategies.
You know,
Or
I
at
think
least
your
those that-
recommendation I think the recommendation or what's worked for you with journaling is such a great idea, and something to also reflect back on too during COVID. I wrote that down for myself.
I think it'll be really interesting, actually. I mean, sometimes they're much better than others. It's like if I'm absolutely exhausted, they're like really short and not as neat. But when I have time and write a lot, I think it would be actually fascinating to look at them, just in like a few years even, and see how it like slowly started.
Yep. Awesome. All right, Drew. Anything other than woodworking you want to share?
So I think it's a lot of it's all behind me, but not all of it is. So I, at the beginning of the pandemic, bought in early on the fitness craze, and I got like weights and stuff, and then I did obviously a lot of woodworking. I made I made 2 shelves for projectors because my girlfriend has a projector. And so we hang these on the wall and we can watch TV on the wall with that. I think it's really great. I live next to Lake Johnson in Raleigh, for those who know what I'm talking about. And so I love going out there. Yesterday, I almost got attacked by a dog though, because I went out like way early in the morning, and like, I don't know, someone was running and then they turned their light off and I saw a dog charging at me, and I was primarily afraid for that one moment, and I don't know, I guess it just dodged away at the last moment and then left me alone. So that person really needs to get some leashes on their dogs. Anyways, man, my vocal cords were like, I didn't realize it until afterwards when I was feeling my vocal cords, but I was screaming, like legit screaming. It was like more of an adrenaline rush than ever. Anyways, side topic. So yeah, I've been up to that. I've gotten back into skateboarding, which I did all through college, but COVID just kind of ruined that for a long time. And this Monday, I'm getting an electric skateboard, so I can really, oh, it's so cool. I can see what you're saying, Ash. It's so cool. This thing goes like 35 miles an hour, which I know I can handle since I've been longboarding for so long. And I got a helmet, I'm staying safe. I'm excited I got a lot of toys recently, between my job starting and the stock market thing that happened earlier. So I don't know, I've been enjoying a lot of different hobbies during the pandemic. And also, Ash, I relate to the knitting thing because I got into crocheting with my girlfriend. So yeah, it's a vibe. I think I'm gonna try to integrate that with my furniture making. Get some polyfill,
Do you have an Etsy shop?
No, I don't. I would need to learn how to mass produce pretty hard for that. I think that would require a table saw. I can talk about table saws all day because I just like heard about something called saw stop, but you know what? I'm gonna save you guys from that. It's basically a saw that retracts into the table when it detects that it's touched meat.
Oh, wow. All right. So I think we are just about at time, but I have one last question that I wanna end this panel on. So I am gonna ask that we be concise because we do have another amazing panel right after this. And that question is, let me pull it up. So going forward, kind of going back to the beginning of this panel around, talking about autism, kind of going back to where we started, what would you like to see come from how people talk about autism? So if you can maybe try and keep your response to maybe a minute and a half, what would you like to see come from how people talk about autism?
Well, like, I would like to see it be less negative and less seen as like a deficit value, because like my mom, she felt really bad because she was like, well, my mom, she didn't really like care. She was like, I want to make sure like you get the help that you need. But part of the reason why I wasn't diagnosed when I was young was because my grandmother saw it in such a negative point of view, in a negative sphere. Like, she didn't see there was like any positives to it. She thought it was just going to be a label that would be a detriment to me for like my entire life. So for me, it's more so I just hope in the future people stop talking about it like it's a deficit, because it's more of a difference than a deficit. Like, most people who have autism tend to have higher functioning, but even if you're not high functioning, which I don't like the labels at all, it's still a difference, not a deficit. So I just hope like in the future people will be nicer when they talk about it.
Yeah, thanks, Ash.
Oh yeah, me. So basically, I don't know if you guys have heard of the movie, if you heard the whole Sia controversy about this movie called Music that she released. Like, I think things like that just infuriate me. It's like, I think the one main thing I wish is that basically people understand that it is, we use like maybe people who are blind or something. I'm not trying to like speak on behalf of them. Like, they might not want a cure, but like they use the word disability because it helps them get their accommodation. And it's like autism, in my view, I don't see it as like a disability, but I use the word disability because it helps me get an accommodation or something that helps me accomplish, something and make it easier. And I think people have to stop seeing, I think overall, like disabilities as like, when we see accommodations, it actually helps us become more productive members of society, because if you have someone who's in a wheelchair, maybe like at home all the time, not working, well, that person is technically a drain on the economy. But if you give that person something to do, they're mentally happier, they're paying more taxes, they're actually contributing to the overall welfare. So I think people need to see that autism is like, it's one of the many things, but I think I wish society's view of disability is that it's an accommodation that will actually benefit the economy and everyone else. Quite frankly, you can even do the numbers.
Yeah.
And stop putting offensive stereotypes. Like, if you have an autistic character, please get an autistic person.
Yeah, it just continues to perpetuate a stereotype, a negative stereotype. Yeah, thanks, Pavani. All right, Ryan.
Okay, so kind of there are two different perspectives. When people are talking about autism itself, I want people to realize that it can be a strength, as in that people with autism or autistic people, I know there are different terms, but I was going to say can be, it can serve as a strength in certain ways. It like the ability to hyper focus. And yet I also want them to be aware, yes, people do sometimes need things a little bit differently. They may need something explained differently, or but that's just, every person is different, and I want those kind of like things to be viewed as something that people just normally would do to for another person, not something that feels like they need to be like an accommodation. It's just something that like people should kind of try to be more understanding of each other, even before or without knowing whether someone has a particular disability or not. It's just something where if everyone was treated in a way, or would interact with other people in a way that would be understanding and try to take into account what they may need, I think that it would benefit everybody. I don't know if that's the best way of saying it, but kind of there's 2 points there. It's kind of the what do people who know about what autism is, and then also the people that just are interacting with someone. I feel like everyone should just kind of take more, be more understanding.
Yeah, empathy, absolutely. Yep. Thanks, Ryan. All right, Drew.
Okay, so one thing I think I want to see more so going forward, I want to see autistic people getting more media representation, but specifically what I want to see is I want to see different, I don't want us to be an archetype. I want us to have the variation of autistic people going in, because autistic people have a lot of different stories, and there seems to be this whole savant who's really socially awkward narrative going on, and that's the only narrative that sells. I don't know if this is a like there's no profit incentive thing going on here or what, but I think that it wouldn't be hard to wiggle one of those characters into a show with all these other identities being represented as well. I think that you could have an autistic character who's not really on the stereotype, someone who lives a more, who does in fact live a life that involves some social success and, you know, doing interesting things instead of just their one like savant skill over and over again, you know? So that's what I want to see. Yeah, as Magnus is saying in the chat, something that doesn't center around their otherness. I want to see an autistic person go out and do things and live life. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Right. Yeah. No, that's all really, really great input. Thank you so much for your parting words, and thank you for your time today. And with this, I think we're going to pass it back on over to Chris. Thank you. Yay.
That was so incredible, y'all. Thank you so much. Okay, so the next panel we have is some people who've been professionals for a while longer than the panelists you just saw. And we've got some different questions for them, and Emily will be leading that panel as the moderator, and she'll be looking to get some of the audience questions answered as well. So with that said, you know, can the next set of panelists turn on their video, and let's get it started.
Hey guys.
Hey.
Hey.
Wait, is my video like what's
your
video?
camera's backwards. Like we're looking at your coffee table. There we go. Hey.
Wicked
Bill,
echo
there's an
somewhere.
echo. I hear my voice through your mic.
Let me see what I can do. Let me restart my computer. I'll be right back. This
Okay.
has been weird.
Okay.
All right.
Hey, Angela.
Hey.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Bill will pop back on. Just to introduce myself again, my name's Emily. Chris and I are engaged, and I've been helping him put this event together. So I am autistic. I was diagnosed with Asperger's when I was 5. My mom, who I think is here still, she took me in for all sorts of flapping around the house as a 5-year-old. And I got a dual degree in math and statistics from NC State University. I work as a SAS programmer, and I love exploring, traveling, and I actually just did an event like this on this system last week with my friends from Zimbabwe, and they got to share about like the similarities and differences of Zimbabwean culture, and the whole confronting of like what we consider normal is very fascinating to me. So that's a little bit about me. And if you see me look over here, it's because I have the chat over there, I have the questions over there. So, and I'll try to be with y'all as much as I can. So with that, as Chris said, there is an opportunity if you're in the audience to ask questions. If you didn't already know, there's like a little go to webinar pane, and then it has like a window that says questions. Feel free to type in questions, feedback. There is a separate window for chat if you haven't seen it, and a lot of people have been engaging on there, so you definitely want to jump in to the chat if you haven't seen it. And really, like, this event is for educating people, so if you have a question and you're like, oh, I don't want to offend, like, we know that you have good intentions, so please just like send in any questions you have, and because we want to answer them versus you finding someone else who maybe isn't autistic to answer it. So definitely take advantage
We won't
of that.
bite, but we might snark.
That's right.
I mean, I'm kind of hungry, so I can find, so.
Okay, cool. And with that, I'm going to jump into some of the questions that happened on the last chat, the last panel that didn't get a chance to get answered. So Magnus, you put something in the chat and that it just ended off talking about like the otherness of autistic people portrayed in the media. And there is a question here that I think might sort of relate to that. And I don't even know how to say this term. Do you have any savant or savant, S-A-V-A-N-T, brilliant skills?
Savantism. It depends on who you ask. I don't think I do. I think I'm just a dad, and there's some stuff like I'm really into. Like there's out of focus cameras all over behind me. I'm really into photography. Am I great at it? No. My non-autistic 14-year-old daughter is better than I am. But at work, it's weird. I feel like I don't have to work that hard, but the work that I do as I'm in management. So like I'm a senior director where I work. I manage managers of managers of engineers. And I don't have to work that hard at it, but the outcomes that I have are like way ahead of my peers most of the time, without putting in crazy hours and without putting in crazy effort. But the stuff that is ridiculously easy for them to do, like I really struggle with. So it's just like we're supposed to do timesheets every Friday. And just being on top of that, like that's work. That's real work for me. But delivering engineering products or like transforming teams, transforming people, it's like breathing for me. So no, I don't think I'm a savant, but I think that just being like wired really out of the typical spec makes it hard for me to do some things that are easy for most people, but it makes it really easy for me to do some things that are really hard for most people.
Got it. Thank you. And just so you panelists know, like not everyone has to answer every question that I ask. So feel free to just jump in if you want to answer it. And so the question on the table is, do you have any, thank you, Magnus, savant, brilliant skills, and how are you channeling it, and can it help other people? So does anybody else want to answer that or speak to that? I've never actually heard of this term, so I'm curious what the thoughts are about this.
I mean, I wouldn't consider myself savant. I do have a PhD though, so there's that. I mean, I do like pretty like hyper focused on certain things, like, and honestly, it gets really good like when I pretty much like if I hyper focus or get like obsessed about like work or something like that, like getting addicted like to physics is like was obviously like a kind of key thing in order to actually get my PhD, as well as what I've been doing for like all the data science stuff I've been doing. Basically, like when I get passionate about something and be able to like to focus on something, I can do some really good stuff. So.
Thank you. Okay, sweet. All right, and then follow up, another question. This is just like an easy one. Have any of y'all read the famous autistic author Temple Grandin, and any thoughts on her? Angela, I see you nodding. Why don't we go to you?
Yeah, I've read her. She has a different experience than I have, which, is not surprising because, it's a spectrum. There are a lot of different ways to do things. I was very interested in the way she was talking about she views things in pictures, and I was talking with my mom and she's like, yeah, I think in pictures too. And I'm like, I don't really think in words. I think more in concepts. So that was made for a very interesting discussion. Everybody in my family is on the spectrum.
That's cool.
So yeah, it led to some very interesting discussions on how we actually think about things.
Go ahead, Magnus. I saw you had the book. Thank you, Angela.
All right. Don't hate me. I know everybody's supposed to love Temple Grandin, and I love Temple Grandin. I just think sometimes we give her point of view too much weight. She's only one autistic person. She represents the experiences of her generation as well. And she represents one autistic experience. I think when she talks, like one of the standard things she talks about is, I think she's reduced us down to 5 different types of autistic thinkers. And when she describes them, like I'm not one of those 5. The way I describe the way I think is like associative pattern thinking. Everything that I experience, I have to connect the dots to everything else in the world. It's a very holistic way of viewing the world. So it like takes everything inside of me. When I said connect the dots, I had to stop myself from doing the Pee Wee Herman connect the dots, la la la. Like I'm thinking that scene in the movie, and I'm connecting to everything. I'm connecting to like when I would play connect the dots with my grandmother when I was camping with her as a child. Like it's just this web of experiences that I draw on. And I think the way she's reduced autistic minds to just 5 sets completely erases my experience. The other thing that I really I don't like is that she suggests that autistic people just need to force themselves into the world and just like deal with it. Build coping skills and just deal with it. The world is what it is. And I think it's a super generational way of looking at things. I think, a lot of younger folks, a lot of younger advocates might say, well, maybe the world can meet us in the middle somewhere. So that's where I stand.
Thank you, Magnus. Anyone else on Temple Grandin?
Guess I have a really brief comment to make.
Sure.
So one thing I do remember her saying is like, and kind of in that vein is that like essentially get a job is the advice, which I think is a positive, but also like we have to consider like I think the unemployment rate for autistics as a whole, like I think it's something on the order of like 70 to 80%, and like that's just a ballpark figure, but why is that the case? It might not be something that's simple. I'm not saying that it's not beneficial, but there might be institutional barriers to that. And I don't want to like also necessarily like think her opinion is that simple, because it could be more complex too. So but that's something that kind of struck me, and I just want to bring that up as well.
I probably associate like, I mean, I guess part of the part like when I read about her stuff was just talk. I mean, you have to consider like the self-esteem aspects of being like prideful and actually doing a job where you actually really enjoy, like feeling flow and things like that. Being able to do something like that can have like a really impactful experience, even like especially if you're like autistic, things like that. Like, I mean, honestly, like a lot of part of my self-esteem is because of like my job. I mean, it probably isn't for the best things like that in terms of work-life balance stuff, but the fact that I am the way I am now is a lot because of like how I've gotten to this point in my life in terms of like focusing on my career and things like that. So there's like it's different like in terms of like how to get there and the barriers there, but like the point of like getting to the point where you actually can like thrive and something like that can actually help, I think.
Thanks, guys and lady. Okay. Right. 2 things. Chris did let me know via text that for the audience members, you can't actually type in the chat, so I apologize that I misled you, but you can view it. Thank you, Magnus. And for myself, I realized, because I know almost everyone here, but I did not give you all an opportunity to introduce yourselves. So let's just do that now. So just say your name, maybe where you live and where you're working, since this is the professional panel. Dan, let's start with you.
Hello.
Hey, Dan.
I'm Danielle. So I'm now located in Santa Clara, California. Before that, I was also in living in North Carolina, and also a North Carolina State alum. And so I've mostly worked in software. I'm a software engineer. I worked at IBM and Microsoft.
Thank you. Magnus?
Hi, I'm Magnus Hedemark. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm autistic and the parent of an autistic teenager, and I'm a senior director of Healthcare Cloud at United Health Group.
Thank you. And Angela?
Hi, Angela Broach. I'm in Durham, North Carolina. I work from SAS as well, doing consulting. And you know, most of my family is on the spectrum as well as myself. My kids are not, but they're not my biological kids. So, yeah.
Thank you. And then Bill.
My name's Bill. I'm a data scientist at IBM. I obviously knew Dan when he was there. Of course, I still know him because he's still here. Let's see. Before there, I got my PhD in physics at Penn State, and before I became a data scientist, I got recently new responsibility in terms of being iteration manager of my group. It's kind of like a scrum thing in terms of not exactly tech lead, but in terms of like getting work done. So I've been excited about that. I'm also the co-chair of the neurodiversity of IBM business resource group. That's been like really important, especially because we made a lot of like cultural change and things like that. And I've been like consulting with the neurodiversity IBM program head. We also have like these safe spaces for like autistic and also neurodivergent people, because it's more than just like autistic. So like we have like one for autistic is around 60 people, and neurodivergence, which includes, well, obviously the autistics and other non-autistic neurodivergent people, like over 100 people at IBM so far. So it's still been like spread like word of mouth, things like that, but it's been really good in terms of like what we're doing. And I can definitely tell like our stuff's having impact, even the point of like relevant for our work, since I'm like in a user research group. And so I'm able to kind of pivot in both like the neurodiversity stuff with my work stuff, which is cool. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Bill. That's awesome. All right, so looking back at the submitted questions, I want to go to this one since Angela, you kind of started to talk about this, and Magnus as well. The question in its entirety is, what are your thoughts on causes? Do you think it's genetic or caused by birth trauma? Does it matter? Related thoughts on having children. So, Angela, you said that none of your kids are biologically yours.
That had
Magnus,
nothing to do.
You have one autistic child. What are your thoughts on if it's genetic or not?
I don't think it really matters too much. I mean, there probably is a genetic component. I certainly didn't adopt because I was trying to avoid having kids who were autistic. I mean, that's just nuts. I just, there was a lack of sperm involved. So, yeah. Sorry.
It's okay. One of my favorite things about being autistic is like I have no shame about anything, and
I love that we could just be direct, get to the point.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that there is some genetic component to it. I don't think that genetics is everything, but once again, I mean, you inherit a lot of things from your parents, and it's not just a weakness, so it's not a bad thing.
I'm absolutely certain that it's not 5G, and it's not
Yes.
vaccines.
Yes.
I'm pretty sure that there were autistic people around way before there was electricity. Think about like some famous eccentric people, Benjamin Franklin, or like what's his face, Leonardo da Vinci, the person who first crawled out of a cave and harnessed the power of fire or invented the wheel. They're probably part of our tribe. So I think autism's been around a long time, and I think we've been passing it down.
Thanks, guys. I want to try something, and if we can't get it to work technology-wise, then we'll keep going with what we're doing.
This is the hold my beer moment.
Right. Sarita has her hand raised. She's asked a question. I'm pretty sure I can unmute her. So Sarita, you should get a prompt or something to unmute, and maybe Chris, you can, I know there it is. Sarita, you there? You should be unmuted, Sarita, now, if you talk. Maybe your mic is not working. Oh. All right. She disconnected. So maybe she's like
Pressure was
restarting
too great.
something. We'll come back to that. All right, new question. So this is the professional panel. So let's talk about like what are some social challenges that you face on your job and what resources help you the most with your job?
Megan, feel like you want to talk.
I didn't want to steal the mic. I talk a lot. The hardest thing for me is in my performance reviews, especially, I'll get like all of this praise for all the stuff I did. And where I work, we do a range of 1 to 5, with 1 being you're imminently going to be fired, and 5 is you're bending our brains and changing our view of what's possible. And I always fall just short of getting the 5. I end up getting a 4, which is like consistently exceeds goals. And this reason I get docked that 1 point every year is the soft skills, that just enough people view me as being prickly and complain about my demeanor that it keeps me from hitting that 5 out of 5. So that's probably the biggest challenge that I face is like every time I have to send an email or every time I'm going to speak at work, I have to kind of like mentally say what I want to say and then neurotypical it up to make other people around me feel more comfortable. I think in terms of the best support, there are very few openly autistic business leaders out there, and a lot of us we know each other, and some of us have formed friendships, and just like having a peer to speak with, somebody who like spends a lot of time working with executives and understands the pressures and the expectations. Just having that peer network has been super helpful.
Thank you. Anyone have something else to add?
Kind of want to have a.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I guess I kind of want to have like a different take on this, because I think it's been different with COVID, because I feel like pre-COVID there were different norms in the workplace, and like when I was in the office, right, like I feel like it was a lot more masking, and like I feel like I would have like kind of shame because like I have a lot of stims and vocal tics, motor tics, and so I feel like having the option to have like turn the video off or mute yourself, it's just been so much more like simple, and I feel like those are also cultural norms, like and if we can like keep that, I feel like it'd be good. So I guess it's screwed up as it sounds. Like I kind of like that there was COVID, but not really, but some aspects. Like it also extends to like literally physically having a mask on, like if I can go out with a mask, I actually feel more comfortable. Like the mask is actually kind of annoying, but it's also less annoying when with the interactions, I feel, because I feel like there's less like I feel like there's often this kind of like analysis done of like your facial expressions and kind of like mood, but then just wearing a mask prevents that by other people, you know, and so they just have to kind of assume, like, and not give any judgment, you know.
You're resonating over here for sure. Thanks, Dan. Bill, you were gonna say something?
Okay, let's see. Probably different fronts. Like first of all, maneuvering politics, like especially like dealing with, I mean, I've actually gotten good because like I've gotten like a really good mentor to help advise me on this. So I kind of had a legs up at trying to figure out things like, is it okay to say this to someone else? If it, like figure out and knowing like, what does this person not know? Is it okay to tell them about this, especially if it's like information which they shouldn't know, and dealing all that kind of confusion. With that, I mean, it's less soft skills stuff, just more of like I don't know, the telephone thing or something like that, if that makes sense. So I know for good or bad, I have this thing where I don't seem to care much about hierarchy, or at least in terms of like being intimidated by it. So that's had as both like strengths and obviously flaws if it bites me or something like that. Let's see, in terms of like my own like personal things, like I know I often have like this little difficulty of trying to figure out like is my tone correct, things like that. And I guess I get pretty defensive in terms of figuring out like if someone else is hurt by me accidentally, things like that. So I guess I tend to be pretty defensive about that, maybe like more apologetic than I might be. But I know that people, I mean, like me. I mean, lots of people, I mean, I know my social skills got a lot better, things like that, but I guess it's more subtle nowadays when it comes to like the more social side aspects of it. I know I've been like pretty persuadable in terms of things, and like obviously I still need to figure out like how do I make sure I get what I want in terms of like getting my team to work more in data science and things like that. But I know there's a way to go. I'm just 2 years of work experience in business, and there's a long path in order for me to get to the point of developing more. So yeah.
Thanks, Bill.
I actually haven't had too many problems work related. Most of my issues have been more in one-on-one personal relationships, and the autism leads me to, you know, sometimes maybe take the other person more literally than I should. But at work, I know probably there are times when I've said things that other people thought were odd, or done things that other people thought were odd, but I kind of still am oblivious to a lot of that. So like, well, if I don't know what I did, then I'm not going to worry about it because, you know, it's done now. But I definitely have enjoyed the silver lining to the COVID cloud of being able to work from home with no worries about having to go into the office. That's been wonderful.
I really something that frustrates me, or at least the fact that I can't seem to do it right. Figuring out what someone else's time zone is to figure out to say, is it okay to text this person? That has been an issue with me. And the fact that like I use Slack at work, and I figured, oh no, it's actually like 5 a.m. for them. I shouldn't be talking to them. So that's always been kind of like, why do I do this type of thing?
Okay, thank you guys. I've been talking to Sarita trying to work out some stuff, and it's like I don't see her here anymore. She's like connecting and disconnecting. So, all right, next question then. Let's see. There's so many good questions here that I can choose from. I'm gonna ask you this for the this is for the younger panelists who just shared. Has it gotten easier to communicate to neurotypical people as you've gotten older? So over time, do you find it easier?
I can honest, absolutely. I didn't even know how to make friends during undergrad, things like that. I worked really hard, like during grad school, in order to learn how to talk with people. I mean, yeah, people consider that masculine and all, but like learning the fact and realizing, oh wait, people are actually starting to pay attention to me because I'm not ignoring them and things like that. Or in terms of like if someone's trying to build like a cue for emotional connection, like not inadvertently ignoring and realizing, well, this is what this is, like that. I've got a lot more deeper friendships and things like that. And obviously I've been able to do for like more than just autistics, like with other neurodivergence has been helpful and things like that as well. So like Max had OCD, has a OCD, for example, and I've been really good friends with her, even like after we broke up, for example. So it's just been, honestly, like overall, it's been just a lot better. I mean, I am pretty weirdly, I don't know how the heck I gotten good at networking and things like that, but I did. Like one time I got laid off and I managed to find a job within a week because of my networking skills. And obviously that's a lot through like neurotypical, things like that. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Bill.
It definitely has gotten easier. Definitely has gotten easier. And I think part of that is I was actually only diagnosed fairly recently. So just knowing, oh, okay, so it's that I'm thinking differently from other people. And I apparently was the only one who didn't realize that I was on the spectrum. But once I realized I was, it did make a big difference in being able to talk to other people, because I could sit there and I could tell them, hey, okay, if I miss something, just be blunt and just tell me. Don't beat around the bush. Or if I think that someone's beating around the bush, I can like be more upfront and say, okay, listen, I think I'm missing something. And that self-confidence is really critical that I gained.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to try this one more time with Sarita. And if Sarita, if we can't hear you, I'm just going to ask your question, okay? So, okay, you're unmuted. Try talking. Can you say hello? I think your mic might not be connected because we can't hear you. Oh. Yep. Bummer. You're unmuting yourself, which is good, and I know you're probably trying to talk, but we can't hear you. So it's probably that your mic isn't set up or it's not connecting. Okay, I'm going to read your question. Sarita, she submitted a few questions here. What do you think the medical world can do to help the autistic person? Also, have you read Dr. Oliver Sacks? He wrote plenty on autism. So Sarita, actually, I'm in a group with her, and I know that she's part of a community that diagnoses people with autism, and I think she does diagnose people with autism, but I don't want to speak for her on that. So she wants to know, oh, here we go. I'm a PEDS neurologist in New York. PEDS.
Pediatric, I think.
Okay. Yeah, so she wants to know, what do you think the medical world can do to help the autistic person?
I haven't read the Dr. Sacks book. I'd very much like to get the title of that so I can read it.
Okay.
Since I'm autistic and I work in the healthcare system, I'm really curious to read that. What can doctors do? I'm gonna make a confession. So I work for my own health insurance company, and I don't have a primary care physician. I haven't had non-emergency medical treatment in 6 or 7 years because I feel like the system is inaccessible to me. It's hard to figure out, like, how do I find a doctor who isn't going to treat me like autism is a mental health condition, because we know it's not, but so many MDs don't. How am I going to find a doctor that's going to take my health concerns seriously and not just try to lump it into, well, it's autism, or worse, like not take my autism into account as a facet of my total body health. So it's the process is hard. Finding a doctor is hard. Making an appointment is hard. Knowing what to do when I show up at the doctor's office is hard. Like unless I get my partner to help me, I don't have an advocate, and I can't navigate that system on my own.
Thank you, Magnus.
I just like one more thing to add. The life expectancy of autistic people is just terrifying. By the numbers, I should have died a long time ago. I will probably die younger than I should from something that's easily preventable or treatable, but it won't be caught because I'm not in the system. And I've got it. I check a lot of privilege boxes. There are a lot of people that don't, and they're going to have it even worse than me. So, all right, I'll shut up now.
No, can you elaborate on that? You're not in the system. What do you mean you're not in the system?
Well, I mean, like, you know, most neurotypical people will go and get their annual checkups, and their primary care physician will see something in their blood panels or see something in the physical exam and send them to specialists just to, you know, make sure, like, hey, I see something a little funny in your blood panels, like, let's take a closer look at that. I don't have any of that, right? So really simple things that are easy to treat when you catch them early won't be caught with somebody like me. So when I say I'm not in the system, I am not getting those annual checkups. I'm not getting those referrals to specialists. And even though I'm entitled to it, I've got the coverage, that's not enough.
Clear. Thank you. Okay. And Sarita did write in that the book is called The Awakening. And then
Okay, thank
she
you. I'll
also
check that
said
out.
in med school period, the movie period. So I think she means there might be a movie on it as well. Sarita, I didn't understand that. Okay, but it's definitely, the book is definitely called The Awakening. All right, and unless anybody else has anything on that one, I will move on to another question. How did getting your diagnosis help you in life? So you can speak to like before diagnosis, after diagnosis, and how did it help you?
Can speak to this one. So I was diagnosed when I was 5, and so I think the hard part is that like you might not know for a long time, and so because I knew I was somehow different for a while, but I didn't actually get, you know, that knowledge that I am, you know, autistic until I was about 10 or 11. And that was mainly because like so I had like an Alpha Smart, and that essentially is like a little portable like a word processor, so you can kind of type on it instead of like writing assignments. So in 3rd grade I was using like a little keyboard instead of like writing assignments, and so people would kind of just tease me for that, and that just really led me to kind of like mask as well, and also just have a lot of, you know, behavior because I was bullied, you know, and so but after that was actually revealed to me, you know, I feel like that helped a lot because, but at the same time, what wasn't helpful was like I felt this need, like kind of this extreme pressure to just like be normal, even when it wouldn't necessarily be helpful. Like I would, like once this was revealed to me, I would often not use like the keyboard, even though like I am like probably in like the 1st percentile for certain fine motor skills, you know, And so like it's kind of confusing, like, because you're
I think his computer froze. I'll give it a second.
Temporal dilation.
It's kind of fun to see him like.
Oh,
He's
okay,
back. Oh,
Dan, you're
he
back.
was back.
There we go.
oh, all right. So where did I cut out? I think my network might have briefly
I
kind of.
don't remember the very last thing you said. Does anybody? The last thing that I heard, you were talking about masking and bullying before.
Okay. So let's see. Yeah. So I think on that train of thought, I was trying to say, like, because once I had the diagnosis revealed to me, like, so that helped a lot, because now I kind of understood like what is different about me, but it also increased this huge amount of pressure to conform. So like, because I was masking probably a bit before that, but just having that knowledge increased that pressure. And like, another thing that kind of happened to me is like I would often be pulled into like a resource room like when I was being punished, and so that to me like also felt like I was getting like excluded, like, so it felt like my disability was sometimes like I felt I was being punished for my disability, and like, sorry, I just it brings up a lot of emotion. And I think to like improve things, it should be there needs to be less stigma and more understanding, and less pressure to kind of conform, so that we can make use of accommodations that do help us. Hope I'm not frozen again.
You were.
You weren't frozen. I was like, is he done?
I thought you were frozen, and then I saw a blink. So I think it was just like an uncertain stop.
Okay, I noticed my cat is making an appearance behind me. Dan, like, really great stuff. Thank you for, sharing with us and letting yourself go through the emotion of that. Is there anything else?
From anyone else or Dan's?
From Dan first. Is there anything else, Dan?
Let's see. I think that's all on my end on that question.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else who's not Dan on that question? Your diagnosis, how it impacted your life, getting it?
So for me, like I was diagnosed in 8th grade, so later than Dan. My life was pretty bad before, but honestly, I'm not sure how much it changed. Like I changed schools and all, actually multiple times. But like in terms of like my mental health and things like that, or my ability to make friends, it didn't really seem to impact it at the time. I was still like really lonely and whatnot. I mean, it got better because like, I mean, I got like things like tutoring, things like that. I realized that I was smart enough to do like good in school, and I was able to go to college, and that was helping in terms of getting that portion. But like in terms of like my social life at the time, it didn't really help on that end, I think. Really in undergrad, I was still like really depressed and things like that. So I really didn't see like my life actually go like on the positive end until like until like grad school or so, I think. So I mean, maybe I'm just like probably just like being on the bush or whatever. I just know that like it took me quite a bit to actually get to the point where I was actually having something good. I did have like social skills groups and things like that when I was younger, but I didn't really like see the point at the time, and I didn't really learn about needing like the social skill stuff until like grad school. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Bill.
It was
Okay.
an
go ahead, Magnus.
absolute life changer for me. I think pre-diagnosis, I like Daniel, I always knew I was different, right? And I was at a young age, getting mental health care, and I went through an array of people that, like, back in the 80s, nobody knew what autism really was. And so that never even came up as a possibility. They would say it's one thing, and then, no, it's not that, and it's something else. No, it's not that. So I only knew I confused the psychologists. But I think pre-diagnosis was much lonelier than now. I think I misunderstood most of the people around me, and any time I felt wronged by them, I immediately went to, like, they're trying to hurt me, right? So I completely misunderstood their intentions, and I think similarly most other people around me misunderstood me as well, which just compounded the problem. Career-wise, I was an engineer. I don't think my technical skills were superlative at all. I just had really good problem-solving skills. So I could solve really complex engineering problems, but the tools that I had to use to, like, build the solution weren't particularly sophisticated. After getting the diagnosis, I went down this rabbit hole. I'm not going to expound too much on it, but I went down a deep rabbit hole of not just self-discovery, but trying to build the tools to fill the gaps where I don't have instincts that will serve me well, and to build protections around the instincts I do have that serve me badly. My career took off. I invested myself very much in learning how to be good at my work. And the weirdest thing happened. My peers went to the CTO and tried drafting me into management. They said they'd rather have me as their boss. Before diagnosis, like, I was a complete jerk to everybody around me, and now, like, people are asking if I can be their boss, and I thought I'd give it a try. I found solving puzzles involving people was way more complex and way more gratifying than solving problems with technology. Like, with technology, if you have an idea, you can tell the technology what to do, and as long as you know how to speak its language, it's going to do exactly what you tell it to do consistently every time. People don't work like that. Like, with people, if you're in a high enough position of power and you tell somebody to do something, if they feel sufficiently motivated, they might do it that one time and they might resent it. But if you work with a person and help them to come to the same conclusion themselves, or come to a shared conclusion together, they're going to do the right thing, whether they think you're looking or not, whether they think you're going to reward them or not. So I think that self-awareness unlocked a lot of latent potential in me that, like, I never would have been able to tap into that pre-diagnosis.
That's awesome. Thank you. All right, Angela, we got 2 orange cats between me and you.
Yeah.
Did you want to answer this one? It's fine if you
Sure.
don't have it. Yeah.
I probably am the last of the group to have gotten a diagnosis, because I really only got it, like, maybe 6 years ago. So I was already well established, and it was actually only my girlfriend at the time was like, all right, you need to see a therapist because I really think you're on the spectrum. And I'm like, And so I, like, went out and I took one of these tests, and sure enough, yep. So I went and found a therapist. It's really hard to find a therapist who will work with people on the spectrum who are adults. It's easy to find them for kids, but for adults, it can be a lot more challenging. But before I had the diagnosis, I went through all the usual, okay, not many friends, always felt very awkward. I tried, but I always felt like a freak and different, and I would come to like, okay, you know, I was raised in a very small southern rural town that was very redneck, and I stood out like a sore thumb. I mean, okay, one, you've got a smart girl, and two, I was gay, and three, I was autistic. So I just like was like everything that they were not expecting. Um, and so when I found out I was gay, I was like, okay, well, that's why I always felt like a freak. But then I still felt like a freak because I'm like, I'm still not quite connecting with people. And then after I got that diagnosis, and I actually, in many ways, credit that now with my much better relationships with people now. I got married last year, and my wife and I are like extremely happy with each other because, oh, I can like verbalize, okay, you know, this noise really bothers me, so I'm going to go in a different room, or she can do the same thing. And it's, I mean, even just listening to people on this panel, it's just a relief, you know, to see, okay, yeah, there are other people, and it's not just you alone, you know. It's great.
Thank you. I felt the same way when I met these guys. I was like,
Yeah.
I remember that day. That was awesome.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I think that this panel was scheduled to go until 3, and I know this whole event was scheduled to go until 4. So there is a follow-up question that I think can be addressed in the chat. I just sent it in there. And then there's a few more questions from the attendees. And Sarita's back. She's on her computer now. She was on her phone before, and she does want to talk. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to ask you all the same question that Danielle asked the other panel, and then I'm going to invite anyone from the other panel to come back on with us, and then to just whoever can stay to just answer these last audience questions. And if you are in the audience and you have a question, do submit it now. So Chris, interrupt me now if you don't like that idea. And otherwise, I'm going to ask you all the last question for this panel, and that let me find it. Danielle asked it. Here it is. Going forward, what would you like to see come from how people talk about autism? And whoever wants to go first can go first.
I just want people to talk about it. I think once you start talking about it and it's not viewed as, oh, well, yeah, they have an issue, then things start coming out and people become more comfortable with it. It's the making it taboo to talk about it or to admit that you have it is one of the biggest problems I see.
I agree. Thank you. I love casually bringing it up in conversations with people at work, and they kind of are like, whoa, you were so flippant and natural about that. Why aren't you ashamed? So I agree completely. All right. Let me find the question again to repeat it. Going forward, what would you like to see come from how people talk about autism?
I want to see us stop using the word disorder, like autism spectrum disorder. What? I'm not broken. I'm not less. I'm just really different. So I think if we start looking at it like this person's creative, that person's logical, you know, these are different ways of experiencing the world and thinking about the world and making decisions. It impacts our gifts, our talents, our strengths and weaknesses. It's just different. I don't want to be euphemistic and say different abilities. Oh gosh, I hate that too. Because society can be disabling. Autism can be a disability in this society. But I'd really like folks to start looking at us as equals in society, that we just like really struggle with the way society has been set up for minds that aren't like ours. It's as if the world was entirely made for right-handed people and had no possible way for left-handed people to, like, there's no scissors for you, and there's like anything else that is supposed to be, have a left-handed option. Imagine that left-handed option didn't exist. I feel like that's how the world is rigged against us. Like there's no concessions made for brains that are just wired to work in a different way.
Thank you, Magnus. Dan or Bill, what would you like to see come from how people talk about autism?
I guess it'd be good for people to frame in terms of like a wisdom of crowds thing. Basically, the idea that if you have like more diverse ways of thinking, then it's easier, or it's a strength in terms of like what you can actually come up with, if that makes sense. And so people think it's more like in terms of like diversity, much like any other types of diversity issue, things like that. It gets a lot easier, if that makes sense, in terms of actually have like a positive framework and things like that. Like I've generally seen like all the neurodiversity stuff, you positively process it because it's like an NTI framework, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Thank you.
I think we need to think about autism in terms of social justice, because first, I think there's an accessibility issue. I think there's been research that people that women um, and Black people, Latino people, and I think some Asian people have trouble in being diagnosed because there may be, presumptions that autism is primarily like white and male. And I think that conversation needs to change. And furthermore, I think there's also different kind of civil rights issues around autism and disability as a whole. Like my partner, she's a law student, and she was kind of explaining to me just the other day, like there's something in law called like levels of scrutiny. And so what this means for disability is that there's a different level of scrutiny for disability claims than for claims made under other like protected classes, like LGBT or race or gender. So it's harder for autistic person to claim discrimination. And then something we've seen with this, like in my own state of California, is like the vaccine rollout has been, only given largely to people over 65. That's good, but we also have to consider, like for example, my own cousin, he's also autistic, but he lives in a group home, and he caught COVID. That's an environment where he's very vulnerable to that, but there wasn't any, I think, consideration given by the government to give the vaccines to a group that should be prioritized.
Thank you. All right, well, that concludes this panel. And now I want to open it up to a bit more of an informal, let's answer some more questions. If we're on the previous panel and you're still here, feel free to join us. You can put yourself back on camera. If you are a panelist and you have to go now, feel free to go. same thing to the audience, although I do invite you to stay. There's some good questions in here. So if you're, let's see, like Ash, oh, hey Drew, and Danielle, you can come join us too if you want. We can have a big party. I know Danielle had some questions. Thank you all for answering them in the chat. She couldn't actually send them to me in the questions pane. So, all right, awesome. Okay, now let's see. Sarita, Sarita, I'm unmuting you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yay! Finally. Well, I feel like I was like that, you know, that fly on the wall that was listening and couldn't really talk and express herself. So first of all, I want to say thank you for the invite from Emily. This is really true to my heart because I not only am a pediatric neurologist diagnosing children by the age of 18 months, I was trained by Dr. Isabel Rappin. I'm throwing names at you guys, right? So Isabel Rappin wrote all of these international papers on autism. And so I was very blessed to be trained by her through Albert Einstein Neurology in the Bronx. Now she's since passed away. So as a child, I took care of my brother who had Down syndrome. And my brother with Down syndrome had autistic features. So growing up, I always thought that every Downs had autism. But as I learned, that's not the truth. And every autistic person is now Downs. So I have really taken it upon myself to try to understand the autistic world as much. And now they have me lecturing on autism. And I'm like, what do I need to know to help not only the early diagnosis and the parents, but I have a lot of adolescent children that, yes, it's such a disconnect when they go from adolescent to adulthood. And I say goodbye to them because the adult world doesn't really take care of these children. So I do really appreciate all the stuff I was listening to since this, you know, this time, and for you guys to be patient with me. So, you know, I'm gonna get rid of disorder in my language. And my lecture always ends, it's the child with autism, not the autistic child. Because I really want people to understand that it's the child first. And my brother is an adult neurologist, okay? So we have it from birth to death, but he doesn't specialize in autism. I don't know if there's such a thing when, again, the autistic child or the child with autism grows up. So I just wanted to get your feedback on that.
I had a bunch. I started putting it in chat in case I couldn't get to it. You were asking about like what should parents know or people getting into this space know, and a couple words that sound almost the same, but they're very different that I think are good to keep in mind: the autism community versus the autistic community. And I think most of the people that you're looking at on the screen here represent the autistic community, but most of the people talking about autism, lecturing about autism, doing research papers about autism, making money from autism are not autistic. And that's really the autism community. I think when you talk about like parents that are finding out for the first time that their kids are autistic, that's a really critical stage. And I think unfortunately many parents get sent in a direction that separates them from autistic adults that could really give them a lot of insights about how to connect with their children. And there's a really unfortunate dynamic, I think, where not all parents, but a lot of parents get sucked into a community that really treats autistic adults as, I think most of us here hear this a lot, you're not like my child, you know, which is terrible. We're not like children because we're not children. We're grown up. We're mature. But you know, a lot of those things that those kids went through, most of us here probably did too when we were children. And then I guess the other thing to be careful of, I think I heard you say something about like they're a child first, and I don't want to mischaracterize what you said, but another really sensitive point in the autistic community. And we're not a monolith. I'm not speaking for everybody, but I think I'm speaking for a lot of people. that autism is an indelible part of who we are. It is our identity for quite many of us. And to be able to say, like, you know, you're a person first, and the autism is just something on the side, is something like we can be super sensitive to. Like, no, every sensory experience we have, every memory we form, every decision we make goes through an autistic brain. You can't separate autism from who we are. If you take it away from me, I'm a fractional human.
Yeah, like in terms of language use, that actually helps in terms of like figuring out like if someone's listening to us, if that makes sense. Like being able to like having like correct language in terms of like how we identify is pretty important in terms of at least knowing if someone's actually like be able to like listen to what our actual needs, if that makes sense. Like I mean, out of like the 60 people I know autistic who are within my company, like pretty much all of them are like identity first, if that makes sense in terms of their preferences. Pretty much everyone knows like online has been like identity first, and the thing is like when it comes to like the way like children are treated like that, like for example, I was diagnosed when I was 13. Like the types of language used, or at least back then when I was younger, it was honestly pretty humiliating. In terms of like how like I was framed as like being autistic, or how my struggles were, if that makes sense. I was never given like any real sense of empowerment. Like, I mean, if there's any empowerment now, it's because like I give to other people now because of what I am. I've always like struggled. Like I had no friends when I was a kid. I had all those struggles, and I was diagnosed then, and it's just no different than I am now. I'm just like I just have like years of experience in terms of where I am now, if that makes sense.
You know, going back, can you still hear me? Going back to what she's saying, what I was trying to convey to, again, these are parents with autistic children, is that these children have the ability to become engineers. These children have abilities to be artists. These children have abilities to be doctors and lawyers and social workers. So for me, it is, I'm listening to you where you're saying it's a fraction of the brain, but really that child is a multiple factorial, where I believe some of my parents, when they hear the diagnosis, they immediately put up the Rain Man, or they put up the stereotype, and therefore they're already limiting that child. And so that's a big problem for me, because I always say I don't have that crystal ball. I don't really know where this child's going to go, but I'm diagnosing them very early. Anyone who's missed by 13, 18 years old, shame on the pediatrician that misses that. Because again, we diagnose them at 18 months, 15 months. I talk about immunizations and vaccinations. So I'm doing this 22 years. And so I want to carry that torch that Isabel Rappin had. And we don't see the autism as being the end all of that child.
Can I say
Ash?
something? Okay. Honestly, you are amazing for diagnosing children so early. Because what a lot of people don't know is that I was actually in special ed and like diagnosed with developmental delays when I was like under 2 years old. So I was actually like probably like in a similar state, a baby in like one of your programs, and they were like, oh, she's developmentally delayed. She's like, I had problems walking, I had problems communicating. But when they put a puzzle in front of me, like they put the keys down on the other side of the blanket, I didn't crawl across the blanket. I pulled the blanket to get the keys in my lap. So like I understand all that stuff about limiting and like stuff on your child, because when I was born 3 months premature. They told my mom not to expect much, because at the time I was born extremely premature in 2000. They were like, yeah, don't expect much. And like something that I have to thank my mother and thank whoever, like all the stuff she did for me, was she really focused on me as like a whole person and not just whatever the doctor said. So like what you were saying there, that it's not like an autistic child is a child with autism, that does make sense, because a lot of parents, when they hear this kind of stuff for the first time, it's like it breaks them, like it breaks their expectations, their dreams, what they want to do with their child. So like I understand the need for like how we like to like frame our language, but in terms of like framing it to parents,
We kind of want them to look at that whole person, to look at the child, not label the child, not put the child in certain boxes, because autistic children can do amazing things, or they can be just like everyone else. You don't have to be special. So that's like something that like parents need to like know, because like, yeah, we're teaching them a language that the autistic community doesn't like to use themselves, but it's beneficial for that child, for the parent to see the kid as more than just their autism. Because if my mom saw me as just my limits, I would not be here today. Because they literally tell my mom she'll be lucky to be like walking and crawling and having like actual good brain function, because I was born so early. So it's like a perspective like that as a child who was like raised by a parent who was told not to expect much. My mom didn't look at the diagnosis, she looked at me. So that's like something we got to realize, is there's a disconnect between the communities, but it shouldn't be a major problem, because let's just say it's like a term used for neurotypicals to understand their child with autism better. But when the child with autism becomes older, then they go to their own identity. So it's more so, it's not labeling the child, it's just helping the parents through their process. That's what I see it as.
I kind of agree with what Ash was saying, actually, to build a little bit. Like, to me personally, I feel like I also was very fortunate. Like, my mom would fight for me and wouldn't accept like kind of anything that was said. It sounds like it was very similar with you, Ash. But I was going to say, like, and it's less about the term used, to me at least, and it's more about making sure that they understand this doesn't change what someone's capable of doing. It might change their path there, but it doesn't change the fact that they're able to achieve amazing things.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember, like, when it comes to autism, like, everyone's development path is different. You can't predict what that development path is going to be. You have like a crystal ball to figure out where you're going to go, if that makes sense. So, I mean, it's just better overall just to not view it as limiting, period. It's just a different development path.
I want to interject here super quickly, because there's something also I want to bring up in terms of like language which may be used by some clinicians. Like, something I've noticed is that
can you mute yourself real quick? There's some feedback, I think, coming from your phone.
I think it's Bill,
There we
maybe?
go.
I don't know.
Thanks, Sarita. And I think you can unmute yourself when you want to talk again. Okay, go ahead, Dan.
I think there's often been like a use of like terms such as like low functioning autism. And I think what we're learning as a community, and I guess with also respect to the research community, is that people who have been deemed low functioning might not necessarily be quote unquote low functioning. And what I mean by this is, you know, there's people like such as Harry Srinivasan, and I might be butchering his name, but you know, he's a he was called a low functioning autistic, but he went on to go to UC Berkeley as a student in psychology, and also you know, he is someone who is minimally speaking, you know, so that shouldn't be a presumption that just because someone has minimal use of language that they cannot go on to college or participate in society, is what I'm trying to say. And he recently wrote a really awesome article about, you know, the Sia music controversy. For those who might not know, the music controversy is about a movie called Music, which features, you know, scenes where a non-speaking autistic is put in restraints, and there's more reasons why it's controversial, but that's just one of the reasons.
There are so many layers to that.
All right, thanks everyone. Sarita, was there? I think you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm really listening to you guys. I really, again, you know, it's really sad. I literally have 30 minutes with these parents from beginning to end in making these diagnoses, getting them resource room, getting them through early intervention and moving on. And the best I could say is that if you could find a great behavioral psychiatrist, someone who not only believes in medication, because I am married to a chiropractor, so I'm probably the most holistic neurologist you're ever going to meet. So I do believe in acupuncture, chiropractic. I do believe that there's so many other modalities there that we can really go into without having to say, take a pill and you're going to cure it. So these are the things that I try to incorporate in my practice, but I'm very limited myself. You know, an allopathic doctor, just understand who you're going to and what their training is. And allopathic doctors are all trained about medication. A DO doctor is trained with manipulation, adjustment, and touch therapy. Biofeedback is another thing that's out there in terms of learning about how to do certain things. But, you know, I don't believe that we have to necessarily rewire our brains. I'm also on Gaia, Gaia, and it's an amazing network that it teaches you about how to rewire your brain. If there's certain things that you don't want to have, whether it's OCD or anxiety, it's amazing. It's like my husband and I, again, we sit on these things and we listen and we learn. It's called GAIA, and it's another way to start thinking about this. I have friends of mine who are on the autistic spectrum. I've never brought up to them that I see all the features, and they're computer engineers, they're amazing, you know, people contributing to society. So that sometimes is difficult for me when I actually see it, let's say even just at a party or something, and I won't really mention it unless someone brings it up. And so that's my question to you. Do you walk around saying it to people, or you pretty much keep it personal to yourself?
I do. That's a really personal choice, very individual, and you're going to get a lot of different answers. I tend to advocate for, at least for people that like check a lot of privilege boxes, it's often safer for us to disclose early and often, especially like I feel some obligation being like really successful that I need to normalize autistic folks in, you know, successful roles in business, so that, you know, my peers and my superiors will take seriously the idea that if we want to see more more leaders that perform like this, then we need to hire and develop more autistic leaders. And likewise, I want the autistic people around me to know they can feel safe coming out. But none of that can happen. The other thing too, for autistic employees, the conversation about your accommodations, your workplace accommodations, can't start until you disclose. So
Yeah,
that just covers the workplace, but I think that's also true like in friendships and stuff like that too. Like your friends aren't going to take seriously your need for gathering in sensory friendly venues if you don't tell them like, hey, I want to hang out with you, but a sports bar is not accessible to me. Like, how about a nice cafe?
It's been a lot easier for me since I became more out, thing like during grad school, things like that, for example, and especially as I got to advocate for more for myself. Like obviously from the work angle, like similar built to Magnus, which is basically I got more and more out, and like obviously like I'm literally like a out autistic running a business resource group, and having that and on that angle has been really important in terms of getting people comfortable, not just with autism, but other types of neurodivergent people being able to be comfortable in terms of like advocating for themselves within the workplace. And that's been like really powerful, the fact that I've been able to do like so much good work there, and it's looked really good I've seen by the company. And like in terms of my own personal friendships, it's been really important in terms of being able to advocate for myself and my needs, similar to what Magnus said. So that's just my personal preference, but I generally had good things in terms of being, once I was able to fully like advocate for myself, things like that. So, and it just kind of used as like another diversity angle.
I'm really curious too to hear perspectives from those of us who aren't like white dudes, because we can get, like I said, it's a privilege. We can get away with a lot of stuff. And so I wonder about people that don't check all those boxes that are on the panel.
I want to respond, Sarita, to what you said, and you know, I'm committed that this is like a safe space for everybody. And when you speak about all that you're up to, and I know you work with children and we're adults, it's I'm left with that, like, over there, like there's something to be fixed about autism, and maybe that's the parents that you deal with. But just so you know, like this whole community, like there is nothing to fix. And that's why we language things the way that we do. And I don't think that was your intention, but you know, if it's there for me, it might have been there for somebody else. So my request is that you ask questions, and that it's just being sensitive to, like, being sensitive to that. All right. As for, I'm out and about, and I always tell people, because, and I like to tell people just whenever it's there for me, and it's
I totally hear you. But again, you are correct. I'm working with the big spectrum of autism. And unfortunately, I am working with moderate to severe children who parents are, yes, trying to fix them. But what I'm saying to the community is that I hear you, that a lot of people are what we called the language, the high functioning autism, don't need to be fixed. So I was trying to mesh those two concepts together, that, you know, again, having a brother with Down syndrome who have autistic features, born 1966, the physician told my mother to institutionalize him, as many Down syndrome children were institutionalized. And so I'm trying to be that physician that doesn't only show sympathy, but also show empathy. And so unfortunately, these parents come to me to fix their children, but I'm trying to give them a whole broad view of really what is out there. So when we have this diagnosis, it's important to get them those early services, as you all know, but at the same time, there's so many children who don't need the services and they outgrow it, but there's so many more emotional components. Like, I didn't even think about what it was like to be pulled off to a resource room and being treated differently when you either needed the help or you didn't. I didn't know about separating these children and making them feel different from their peers. Like, the teachers aren't always doing the right thing and doing it the right way. I can write a prescription and I could just give it to a parent and I may not explain it to the parent. I'm dealing with Haitian, I'm from Haiti. I'm dealing with Haitian parents, Latino parents who have a language barrier, and they themselves have even more issues in terms of advocating for their children. So I'm really saying it's not something to fix for everyone, but these parents come to me with that mentality, and I'm really working on trying to help. And I would love to introduce some of my adolescent children and patients who are in college and high functioning to this group. And that's really what I'm looking at, is who can help and support this community that I don't know where to send them to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think some people here have some resources probably we can put in the chat, or anybody have any resources to help Sarita?
Let me think for a little bit. I feel like there were some things being like kind of in my generation, there was a lot more available. So I'd have to try to think. I feel like there were a couple, but I can't remember their names right now.
I think, you know, this event was created, autisticgold.net. You know, it could be if parents of autistic children attended webinars like this and interacted with autistic people, I think that could make a huge difference also. And Sarita, I think you can see the chat on your computer. People are putting some websites in there as well.
Yeah, because groups like this are for parents is it would be super beneficial, because I know like my own parents, well, my dad was just okay, cool, but my mom, she was like looking for resources, trying to like learn more, and it is super daunting. Like I don't remember what it was when my mom was being told I had like like deficits, when they were telling me that I was developmentally delayed, that I might never do stuff like that. But that was in the early 2000s. The internet was still really new, and my mom managed to get through it amazingly without like access to groups. So I think like one thing you could do with your patients and your patients' parents is hopefully like make like a space where they can connect with each other, because a lot of parents, they try a lot of things and they sometimes don't know about certain things. So just getting that knowledge out there and teaching them would help them like like enormously, because even though their children are all different, they're all united in the same goal of helping their child succeed. So it's just like, in terms of finding resources, we are making some, we are getting some. The autism community is getting better at it, but it does take a while, and hopefully we'll find more resources, because I'm still looking for resources myself, because being a college kid is rough. But yeah, I gotta drop out soon. I gotta get my COVID test this week. Oh,
I can certainly, I can relate to parents who have a child who's showing difficulties in adjusting and coping. One of my kids was certainly special needs. And honestly, I think the biggest help was actually not really for the child, but for me to have someone to talk to about her emotional problems, and having another parent who's like, yes, I've been through that. I had a child who was doing these things, and this is how we dealt with it. Or, yeah, that's rough. There's not a whole lot you can do to change them. You just have to let them be who they are. And I think that certainly applies to kids on the autism spectrum who are in a much healthier place than my oldest was. But yeah, parents being able to talk with other parents, because then some things you can give them, like for parents who are well educated, you can be like, okay, well, go talk to this therapist, read this book, blah, blah, blah. But if you have people who are having difficulty with language, if there are other parents who have that same difficulty who speak Spanish, that really would be a lifeline.
Thanks, Angela. Yeah, I'm just like, the whole point of this event was created to talk about the autistic narrative, right? And I just got present to, like, what if parents in the world could have a baby and then be like, oh, it's autistic. Okay, cool. And not just be that, and then go, because here's the thing. I don't want kids, okay? If I had a kid, no matter what, I would not know what the heck to do. And I think most parents kind of fall into that category at some point or another. So, if people just related to it that way, what difference that could make, which is pretty cool. For the sake of time, I'm going to move on to like one of the last questions in the chat. And the question is, what are things people close to you can do to be more supportive and accommodating? So people like close friends, family, what are some things they can do to be supportive and accommodating?
Listen, maybe be there. I feel like I've been very fortunate that my family has always been extremely supportive of anything I need, but also kind of touching on what we were saying earlier, people shouldn't view things as, yes, we do face obstacles, but I was going to say that it shouldn't be something like putting a barrier of something you cannot do. Like, don't impose like a limitation on yourself or on others around you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, don't assume. If you think, if you're upset because I said something, maybe you should ask what I meant, because sometimes things
Yeah.
don't come across the way you think they are.
I don't know if this one resonates
Yeah.
with anybody else, but I think we can be great friends. But just speaking for myself, I'm not the kind of friend that has the executive function wherewithal to organize social gatherings. So if the measure of a good friend is somebody who like calls you and says let's go out and have a drink or have a coffee or whatever, I'm never going to be that friend. But if you ask me to come be part of that group, I'm there. So I don't know. Does that resonate with anybody else on the panel, or am I just a weirdo?
Totally. Totally.
And I added one other thing also, being very clear and straightforward. Don't like try to hide something if it's wrong, because we won't see it. Like that's the thing. So I won't get that social cue or something like that. So I need people to be very open.
Yeah, we got some of this work. We've been trying to push like radical candor in terms of being able to be like actually candid about things. It's just something that would be pretty tough for like neurotypicals to get, things like that. But basically, that's kind of like my mindset. And in terms like that, you need to be able to like don't expect us to try to get hints, if that makes sense, and be able to actually tell you what you're actually feeling, especially because if we're not going to basically try to communicate things verbally, which you may not necessarily do, if that makes sense. Don't try to like give hints and things like that. You need to be as direct as possible. So yeah. Back it sound like what you just said. Radical candor, neurotypical people learning how to speak autistically. So yeah.
Okay. Thanks, guys. How do we want to close this out, Chris?
Okay, so the purpose of this event really was just to connect us autistic people and to have a space to share our stories. And the purpose of this event was not to talk about what parents thought about us, or how we're so wrong, or anything like that. Every single person on this panel that I invited because they're such incredible, beautiful people, and I wanted to hear from them during this quarantine. Every single one of these persons that you see are incredible. And you don't have to change anything about it. You don't have to say that they're a person with autism. There are autistic people, and they are awesome. There's nothing to fix about that. Nothing at all. And you can't take that away from us. And, I want to acknowledge every single one of you for attending this event and for giving your voice to this, and for all the audience members for giving their questions, and a lot of them were really awesome, and yeah, I just thank you all so much.
Nobody's saying anything, so I'll give you some virtual glitter.
Woohoo!
Hey. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Hasta la hamster.
Huh?
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you all for attending.